guns on the F4 and thus to reduce the rounds per gun. Many of our fighters ran out of ammunition even before the Jap dive bombers arrived over our forces. These were experienced pilots, not novices. 27. They were astounded by the Zero's superiority. Sad smiley 28. In the Coral Sea, they made all their approaches from the rear high side and did relatively little damage because of our armor. It also is desired to call attention to the fact that there was an absence of the fancy stunting during pullouts or approaches for attacks. In this battle, the Japs dove in, made the attack and then immediately pulled out, taking advantage of their superior climb and maneuverability. In attacking fighters, the Zeros usually attacked from above rear at high speed and recovered by climbing vertically until they lost some speed and then pulled on through to complete a small loop of high wing over which placed them out of reach and in position for another attack. By reversing the turn sharply after each attack, the leader may get a shot at the enemy while he is climbing away or head on into a scissor if the Jap turns to meet it. 27. In contrast, Allied fighters were designed with ruggedness and pilot protection in mind. 29. The Japanese Ace Sakai described how the toughness of early Grumman aircraft was a factor in preventing the Zero from attaining total domination. I had full confidence in my ability to destroy the Grumman and decided to finish off the enemy fighter with only my 7.7mm machine guns. I turned the 20mm cannon switched off position, and closed in. For some strange reason, even after I had poured about 500 or 600 rounds of ammunition directly into the Grumman, the airplane did not fall, but kept on flying. I thought this very odd. It had never happened before and closed the distance between the two airplanes until I could almost reach out and touch the Grumman. To my surprise, the Grumman's rudder and tail were torn to shreds, looking like an old torn piece of rag. With his plane in such condition, no wonder the pilot was unable to contain that many bullets would have been a ball of fire by now. 30. When the Lockheed P-38 Lightning, armed with 4 light barrel and /M2.50 cal Browning machine guns and done 20mm autocannon, and the Grumman F6F Hellcat and Vought F4U Corsair, each with 6 and forward /M2.50 caliber Browning guns, appeared in the Pacific Theater. The A6M, with its low-powered engine and lighter armament, was hard-pressed to remain competitive in combat with an F6F or F4U. The only positive thing that could be said of the Zero at this stage of the war was that, in the hands of a skillful pilot, it could maneuver as well as most of its opponents. 17. Nonetheless, in competent hands, the Zero could still be deadly. Because of shortages of high-powered aviation engines and problems with planned successor models, namely the superior Mitsubishi A6M 2-Rep, the Zero remained in production until 1945, with over 10,000 of all variants produced. Allied analysis. Chinese opinions. The Japanese deployed the A6M during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Inevitably some machines were lost, with at least 2 falling more or less intact into Chinese hands. The first known example, an A6M2, the 12th of the 15th pre-production aircraft, serial V110, fell near Fainan Island. On the 18th of September, 1940, a team, including Western volunteers assisting the Chinese, examined the wreck. It was largely intact, and a detailed report was compiled and sent to the U.S. The second, an A6M2-21, serial V173, made a forced landing near Tiat same airfield the 17th of February, 1941. The pilot was shot before he could destroy his plane, the fuel system fixed, and it was taken into Chinese service. The plane was extensively flown and studied by a team which included Gerhard Newman, and a detailed and illustrated report was sent to Washington. Overall they were impressed with the quality of the machine, less so by the performance, although this was later put down to using 85-octane fuel rather than the 100-octane required by the Seiki engine. 31. American opinions. The American military discovered many of the A6M's unique attributes when they recovered a largely intact specimen of an A6M2, the Akutan Zero, on Akutan Island in the Aleutians. During an air raid over Dutch Harbor on the 4th of June, 1942, one A6M fighter was hit by ground-based anti-aircraft fire. Losing oil, Flight Petty Officer Tadayoshi Koga attempted an emergency landing on Akutan Island about 20 miles, 32 kilometers, northeast of Dutch Harbor, but his Zero flipped over on soft ground in a sudden crash landing. Koga died instantly of head injuries. His neck was broken by the tremendous impact, but his wingman hoped he had survived and so went against Japanese doctrine to destroy disabled Zeros. 32. The relatively undamaged fighter was found over a month later by an American salvage team and was shipped to Naval Air Station North Island, where testing flights of the repaired A6M revealed both strengths and deficiencies in design and performance. 29. 33. The experts who evaluated the captured Zero found that the plane weighed about 2,360 kilograms, 5,200 pounds, fully loaded some 1,260 kilograms, 2,780 pounds, lighter than the F-4F Wildcat, the standard United States Navy fighter of the time. The A6M's airframe was built like a fine watch. The Zero was constructed with flush rivets, and even the guns were flush with the wings. The instrument panel was a marvel of simplicity, with no superfluities to distract the pilot. What most impressed the experts was that the Zero's fuselage and wings were constructed in one piece, unlike the American method that built them separately and joined the two parts together. The Japanese method was much slower but resulted in a very strong structure and improved close maneuverability. 29. American test pilots found that the Zero's controls were very light at 320 km per hour, 200 miles per hour, but stiffened at speeds above 348 km per hour, 216 miles per hour, to safeguard against wing failure. 34. The Zero could not keep up with Allied aircraft in high-speed maneuvers, and its low never-exceed speed, VNE, made it vulnerable in a dive. Testing also evaluated that the Zero could not roll as quickly to the right as it could to the left, which could be exploited. 32. While stable on the ground despite its light weight, the aircraft was designed purely for the attack role, emphasizing long range, maneuverability, and firepower at the expense of protection of its pilot. Most lacked self-sealing tanks and armor plating. 29. British opinions. Captain Eric Brown, the chief naval test pilot of the Royal Navy, recalled being impressed by the Zero during tests of captured aircraft. "I don't think I have ever flown a fighter that could match the rate of turn of the Zero. The Zero had ruled the roost totally and was the finest fighter in the world until mid-1943. 3. Variants. A6M1, Type 0 prototypes. The first two A6M1 prototypes were completed in March 1939, powered by the 580 kilowatts, 780 HP, Mitsubishi Zuzia 13 engine with a two-blade propeller. It first flew on the 1st of April, and passed testing within a remarkably short period. By September, it had already been accepted for Navy testing as the A6M1 Type 0 carrier fighter, with the only notable change being a switch to a 3-bladed propeller to cure a vibration problem. A6M to a Type 0 Model 11. 2 zeros over China. While the Navy was testing the first two prototypes, they suggested that third be fitted with the 700 kilowatts, 940 HP, Nakajima Seiki 12 engine instead. Mitsubishi had its own engine of this class in the form of the Kinsia, so they were somewhat reluctant to use the Seiki. Nevertheless, when the first A6M2 was completed in January 1940, the Seiki's extra power pushed the performance of the Zero well past the original specifications. The new version was so promising that the Navy had 15 built and shipped it to China before they had completed testing. They arrived in Manchuria in July 1940, and first saw combat over Chongqing in August. There they proved to be completely untouchable by the Polikarpov I-16S and I-153S, that had been such a problem for the A5MS when in service. In one encounter, 13 Zeros shot down 27 I-15S and I-16s in under 3 minutes without loss. After hearing of these reports, the Navy immediately ordered the A6M2 into production as the Type 0 carrier fighter, Model 11. Reports of the Zero's performance slowly filtered back to the US. They were met with skepticism by most US military officials, who thought it impossible for the Japanese to build such an aircraft. A6M2B Type 0 Model 21. After the delivery of the 65th aircraft, a further change was worked into the production lines, which introduced seat-folding wingtips to allow them to fit on aircraft carriers. 16. The resulting Model 21 would become one of the most produced versions early in the war. A feature was the improved range with 520 L, 140 US gal, wing tank and A6M20 Model 21 of Shikoku prior to attack on Pearl Harbor, 7 December 1941-320 L, 85 US gal, drop tank. When the line switched to updated Model 740, Model 21S had been completed by Mitsubishi, and another 800 by Nakajima. Two other versions of the Model 21 were built in small numbers. The Nakajima built A6M2N roofed float plane, based on the Model 11 with a slightly modified tail, and the A6M2K two-seat train ROF, which a total of 508 were built by Hitachi and the Sasebo Naval Air Arsenal. 35. A6M3 Type 0 Model 32. A6M3 Model 32 in 1941, Nakajima introduced the Seiki 21 engine, which used a 2-speed supercharger for better altitude performance, and increased power to 831 kW, 1130 HP. A prototype Zero with the new engine was first flown on the 15th of July 1941. 36. The new Seiki was slightly heavier and somewhat longer due to the larger supercharger, which moved the center of gravity too far forward on the existing airframe. To correct for this, the engine mountings were cut back by 185 mm, 7.3 in, to move the engine toward the cockpit. This had a side effect of reducing the size of the main fuselage fuel tank, located between the engine and the cockpit, from 518 L, 137 US gal, to 470 L, 120 US gal. The cowling was redesigned to enlarge the cowl flaps, revise the oil cooler air intake, and move the carburetor air intake to the upper half of the cowling. 37. 38. The wings were redesigned to reduce span, eliminate the folding tips, and square off the wingtips. The inboard edge of the aileron was moved outboard by one rib, and the wing fuel tanks were enlarged accordingly to 420 L, 110 US gal. The two 20mm wing cannon were upgraded from the Type 99 Mark L to the Mark II, 37, which required a bulge in the sheet metal of the wing below each cannon. The wings also included larger ammunition boxes and thus allowing 100 rounds per cannon. The Seiki 21 engine and other changes increased maximum speed by only 11 km per hour, 6.8 miles per hour, compared to the Model 21, but sacrificed nearly 1,000 kilometers, 620 mi, of range. 36. Nevertheless, the Navy accepted the type and it entered production in April 1942. 39. The shorter wingspan led to better roll, and the reduced drag allowed the diving speed to be increased to 670 km forward/h, 415 miles per hour. On the downside, turning and range, which were the strengths of the Model 21, suffered due to smaller ailerons, decreased lift and greater fuel consumption. The shorter range proved a significant limitation during the Solomons campaign, during which Zeros based at Rabaul had to travel nearly to their maximum range to reach Guadalcanal and return. 40. Consequently, the Model 32 was unsuited to that campaign. 39, and was used mainly for shorter range offensive missions and interception. This variant was flown by only a small number of units, and only 343 were built. A6M3 Type 0 Model 22. In order to correct the deficiencies of the Model 32, a new version with folding wingtips and redesigned wingways introduced. The fuel tanks were moved to the outer wings. Fuel lines for a 330L, 87 US gal drop tank were installed under each wing, and the internal fuel capacity was increased to 570L, 150 US gal. More importantly, it gained its capabilities for long operating ranges, similar to the previous A6M2 Model 21, which was vastly shortened by the Model 32. However, before the new design type was accepted formally by the Navy, the A6M3 Model 22 already stood ready for service in December 1942. Approximately 560 aircraft of the new type had been produced in theme and time by Mitsubishi Jukoji OK.K. 41. According to a theory, the very late production Model 22 might have had wings similar to the shortened, rounded tip wing of the Model 52. 42. One plane of such arrangement was photographed at Lacunae Airfield, Rabaul East, in the second half of 1943, and has been published widely in a number of Japanese books. While the engine cowling is the same of previous Model 32 and 22, the theory proposes that the plane is an early production Model 52. 43. The Model 32, 22, 22Ku, 52, 52Ku and 52 Otsu were all powered by the Nakajima, Seiki, 21 engine. 40. That engine kept its designation in spite of changes in the exhaust system for the Model 52. A6M4 Type 0 Model 41/42. Mitsubishi is unable to state with certainty that it ever used the designation A6M4 or model numbers for it. However, A6M4 does appear in a translation of a captured Japanese memo from a Naval Air Technical Arsenal titled Quarterly Report on Research Experiments, dated the 1st of October 1942. 44. It mentions a cross-section of the A6M4 intercooler then being designed. Some researchers believe A6M4 was applied to one or two prototype airplanes fitted with an experimental turbo-supercharged Seiki engine designed for high altitude. 45. Mitsubishi's involvement in the project was probably quite limited or nil. The unmodified Seiki engine was made by Nakajima. 40. The design and testing of the turbo supercharger was the responsibility of the 1st Naval Air Technical, Arsenal, Daiichikigun KKSH, at Yokosuka. 44, at least one photo of a prototype plane exists. It shows a turbo unit mounted in the forward left fuselage. Lack of suitable alloys for use in the manufacture of a turbo super